Hello and welcome to the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund Challenges of Modern Day Policing series. I'm Jason Johnson, President of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund. I'm joined by Bill Gleason, our police use of force expert. Bill, today we're going to talk about some of the physiologic effects of stress. These are the physical changes that happen, or physiologic changes that happen to law enforcement officers when they are involved in a dangerous situation, one that they perceive as dangerous and stressful, where there's a real threat to their safety. So talk a little bit about, you've studied this. Talk a little about what happens to anyone, whether they're a law enforcement officer or not, any human being, what happens when they're faced with a real stressor?
And I think that's what an important focus, as you said, police officers are human beings as well. And we're just a little bit more trained than the average citizen, but we still experience the same human response to stress. And officers are involved in encounters every day that are stressful, especially a deadly force encounter. So officers go through, like everybody else does. Tunnel vision, for example, is one of the most common, where under stress you get a narrowing field of vision. As your heart rate goes up, your body starts to shut down a little bit. So you get a narrowing field of vision and you may not see something on the peripheral. Auditory blockage, where as your stress level goes up, the body to protect itself starts to basically shut down. and officers won't hear everything that's going on around them, other officers communicating or a suspect communicating with them or saying something to them. Memory distortion, as your stress level goes up, you're not going to remember everything. That's why it's so important to come here and go through the simulator, because even though it's not as stressful as a real life situation, you're going to still experience the same physiological responses to stress that officers go through in these use of force things. Time distortion. A lot of officers will say in deadly force encounters that either things went in slow motion or they sped up. Cognitive impairment, meaning as your heart rate goes up, you're not getting enough oxygen to the brain, you're not thinking clearly. So an officer may make an honest mistake in just not thinking clearly. So these are all examples of physiological responses to stress that officers go through when they're being faced with a deadly force threat against them or others.
So we have a scenario we experienced just today. We put a participant into a simulator, use of force simulator experience, where they are exposed to a very highly threatening situation, and they focus on it, and then they miss another highly threatening situation. Right, it's really literally right in front of them, but they miss it because of this same phenomenon. Right.
Officer, hey, sorry. I set up my wall under the seat. I'm trying to find. Hold on.
I'll let you get in a second. Just turn that easy down. Thank you. Do you have your license on you? How about the registration?
I'm sorry. Can you explain to me again why?
Absolutely. You blew a couple of stop signs. You were weaving through the road. I'm just checking on you. Do you have your license on you or your registration?
This is my girlfriend's car.
Your girlfriend's car. Which one's your girlfriend?
Amber.
Is that her in the back seat? What's your girlfriend's name?
That's my girlfriend.
Okay.
Amber.
Amber. What's wrong with Amber? Is she asleep?
She was drinking a little bit earlier.
Oh, okay.
And got a little too much sun. And
How about you?
She's fine. She's fine now. I was actually just on my way to take her home.
Okay. Where does she live?
Just over on Parkside.
Okay. Why don't you check the registration in the glove compartment for me, buddy? Can you do that for me?
What? I'm not a part of this. I don't have to listen to you.
Just
I can
hang
do
on,
whatever I
dude.
want.
Hey, whoa!
Oh shit!
So that's a situation that law enforcement officers are faced routinely. If they're facing a dangerous situation, they don't know if there can be sometimes there are multiple suspects, sometimes there are other elements involved that could present danger that they don't even recognize.
Right.
Thinking back on like some actual academic studies that have been on this, I know that you've used a particular training device to sort of show people how this works. I know that there's a study that was done some time ago by some psychologists where you put a group of people and the participant is asked to monitor how many times a ball exchanges hands. And right in the middle of this, you're watching this video, and a man dressed as a gorilla walks in, beats his chest, and then walks back out. And over 50% of the people who go through this exercise never even see the gorilla?
We use this when I conduct my training with citizen and civilian groups, and that number is actually higher, that they're so focused on one thing, they get tunnel vision, and something that's obvious, if you're not so focused on that, it's obvious to everybody, because when you watch it the second time, you say, don't worry about the task we gave you the first time, and it's obvious to you. But people, same thing, until you come and experience this for yourself, like, how could I miss something like that? It was right in front of them, and they saw it, they just don't remember seeing it. So that was a physiological response to stress, because it just went in their short-term memory, and it was erased because their stress level's up, they were given a task and missed something that was right in front of them. And that's important, because that can happen to victims of crimes, witnesses in crimes, and it can happen to police officers too, that they may not see something, pretty close to being in front of them, because they are so focused on something else, or their stress level's so high they just didn't pay attention and remember something that occurred during a stressful situation.
It's a great observation. It happens to everyone. And another context this comes up in is that when a police officer is involved in a critical incident like this that results in a use of deadly force, oftentimes, and you and I both have experience of talking to officers in this situation, where they have a hard time for a while remembering what happened because of this distortion that happens.
Right. Yeah, critical stress amnesia is what it's called. It's that as your heart rate goes up, your memory is affected by it. So they're not trying to hide anything or cover anything up. It's just all the studies and the science shows that it's impossible to remember every detail of a critical incident. And especially immediately after a critical incident. That's why it's good to allow an officer that just went through a life-threatening incident to recall information and reconstruct it in their minds. They can go home, get some rest, think about it, reconstruct it in their mind, and that's why it's always recommended to give them a couple days. We want them to get their story straight. We don't want them to confabulate, which means the power of the subconscious mind. They can actually make things up if it doesn't make sense to them. We want them to have time to calm themselves down, reconstruct and recall the information so they can try to remember as best they can. But it's impossible to remember every detail of a critical incident during a stressful situation.
It's so difficult to make folks who have never been in this kind of situation understand what that's like, and that's why, again, using our use of force simulator, we're able to kind of show how this kind of thing could happen.
When people participate in it, we're certainly not trying to embarrass anybody or make them look bad, but we'll do a debrief with them right after they just went through a simulator. Remember, this is just a simulation, it's not real life, they're not going to get hurt, and they won't hear things that happen, won't see things that were right in front of them. We'll ask them, what just happened? And they won't remember firing the weapon, things like that. So it's so important for them to experience it, not just hear about it, but when they experience it, they have a better understanding and appreciation for it.
Great. Physiological effects of stress. Thank you, Bill, and thank you for joining us on the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund Challenges of Modern Day Law Enforcement series.